It's Christmas Eve. The Sodder house is full of noise. Marion has just come home from work with toys she bought herself for her 3 youngest sisters. The little ones are so excited their mother lets them stay up past bedtime. Just this once. It's Christmas after all. Somewhere upstairs, the youngest daughter is already asleep. George and the older boys are asleep too, tired from a day of work. Jenny checks on the younger children one last time, reminds Maurice and Louis to put the cows in before they go to bed, and goes upstairs. By midnight, the house is quiet. By 1 a.m., it is on fire. 5 of their children will never be seen again. Not confirmed dead, not found alive, just gone. What happened in Fayetteville, West Virginia on Christmas Eve 1945 has never been answered. And the closer you look at the evidence, the more you realize this was never just a house fire. This is the Sodder case, and I need you to stay with me. George Sodder was the kind of man who built things from nothing. He had come over from Sardinia at 13 alone, barely speaking English, and worked the Pennsylvania railroads, carrying water to laborers. Back-breaking work for a boy. He saved. He moved to West Virginia. He started a trucking company with his own hands. He met Jenny Cipriani at her father's store. She had come from Italy herself as a 3-year-old, and they married in 1923. Over the next 20 years, they had 10 children. 10. The kind of loud, full, chaotic household where someone is always crying, someone is always laughing. By 1945, they were one of the most respected families in Fayetteville. George had opinions, strong ones, and was not shy about sharing them. He criticized Mussolini by name, loudly, in an Italian immigrant community where not everyone agreed. That habit would matter. We will come back to it. That evening had started beautifully. Marion, 19, the oldest daughter, had surprised her 3 little sisters with toys she bought herself from the dime store where she worked. Betty was 5, Jenny was 8, Martha was 12. They were thrilled in the way only children on Christmas Eve can be thrilled. Entirely, completely, with no reservation. Jenny told the younger ones they could stay up a little later, just that night. She took 2-year-old Sylvia upstairs. She reminded Maurice and Louis to put the cows in before they slept. George was already in bed, the older boys too. The house settled. At some point after midnight, the phone rang. Jenny answered. A woman's voice, someone she did not recognize, asked for a name she did not know. Wrong number. Jenny hung up and noticed, half asleep, that the lights downstairs were still on. She went back to bed without turning them off. She would think about that phone call for the rest of her life. Around 1 a.m., Jenny woke to the smell of smoke. The office at the far end of the ground floor was already burning. She screamed for George. She screamed for the children upstairs. She and George got out. 4 of the older children got out, but the flames had consumed the staircase. The 5 youngest were somewhere up there, behind walls of smoke and fire, and there was no way through. George ran for the ladder he always kept propped against the side of the house. It was gone. He ran to his coal trucks, both of them. He had driven one just hours before. Neither would start. He tried to call the fire department. The line was dead. George broke a window and tried to climb back in. The heat drove him back. He sliced his arm open on the glass and did not notice until later. His voice was already raw from screaming their names. A neighbor reached the fire chief just after 1 a.m. The department was 2.5 miles away. They arrived at 8 a.m., 7 hours later. By then, the house was ash. I need you to stay with me here, because this is where it stops being a tragedy and starts being something else. The fire marshal made his determination quickly. Faulty wiring. The children, he said, had been consumed, their remains incinerated. George Sodder walked into those ashes with his hands. He found nothing. No bone, no tooth, No fragment, nothing. Here is why that matters. The human body does not simply disappear in a house fire. Bone is extraordinarily resistant to heat. Even professional cremation, sustained above 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit in a sealed furnace for 2 to 3 hours, leaves behind bone fragments that must be manually ground to powder. The Sodder house fire burned for 30 to 45 minutes. It was open air. It burned cooler and shorter than any cremation process. Investigators found the ceramic toilet intact in the rubble, the metal springs from the sofa, chimney fragments. The fire did not destroy everything. It destroyed only the children. Jenny went and spoke with a crematorium worker directly. He confirmed what she already suspected. Bones the size of a child's, at those temperatures, for that duration, do not vanish. Something always remains. And then there was one more detail, small, almost easy to miss. The Christmas tree lights were still on during the fire. The power had not gone out, but faulty wiring, the official cause, would have tripped the fuses. The wiring had also been recently inspected and certified safe. I want you to notice something. 3 separate systems failed on the same night. The ladder gone. Found later in a ditch some distance from the property. It had not fallen, it had been moved. The coal trucks serviced and operational that evening would not start. A mechanic found evidence of tampering in the fuel system. The telephone line was dead. A lineman later confirmed it had been physically cut, not burned through. Severed 14 feet off the ground, 2 feet from a utility pole. The fire had not reached it. A man was later arrested near the property, caught stealing a block and tackle. He admitted cutting the telephone line, claiming he thought it was a power line. His real reason for being there that night was never established. The fire chief signed off on accidental cause. Death certificates were issued 6 days after the fire. The case began to close. The Sodder family did not let it. A witness came forward. A bus driver passing the Sodder property before the fire was reported said he saw a man on the road near the house, throwing what appeared to be balls of fire onto the roof. Another witness said she saw the children's faces in a passing car after the fire had started. A woman at a Charleston hotel said she checked in 5 dark-haired, quiet children, with 2 men and 2 women she described as Italian, on the morning of December 25th. The children did not speak. 5 separate people in Cortez, Florida, reported seeing children matching the description. A woman in St. Louis said Martha was in a convent. A man in Texas heard something in a bar about a West Virginia Christmas fire. Someone in Florida claimed the children were with a relative. George chased every single one. He came home empty every time. George hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley. Tinsley started pulling threads. What he found did not close the case. It tore it wide open. Then came the letter. Then came the photograph. And then came the question that has never been answered. Most accounts of the Sodder case give you atmosphere and leave you with unease. We are going to do something different. We are going to sit with each theory, examine it the way an investigator would, give it the weight it deserves. And then I want you, as the person watching this, to decide where the evidence actually points. Because there are 4 serious theories in this case, and not one of them fully closes. Theory 1, the children died in the fire. This is the official position. The fire marshal declared it accidental. Death certificates issued December 30th, 6 days after the fire. Faulty wiring, 5 deaths, case closed. The argument is that the fire burned hot enough and long enough to destroy the children completely. That grief drove the parents toward denial, that the absence of bones, while unusual, is not impossible. Here is where we test it. The fire burned approximately 45 minutes. Cremation requires 1,400 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, sustained for 2 to 3 hours in a sealed furnace. A house fire burns cooler and shorter. The ceramic toilet survived. The sofa spring survived. The chimney survived. The official theory requires you to believe that 5 children burned completely, while a porcelain toilet did not. That is the theory the state signed, sealed, and closed. Theory 2. The insurance salesman and the corrupted inquest. 3 months before the fire, October 1945, a life insurance salesman came to the Sodder home. George turned him down. The man's response, documented at the time: "Your house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." He said it was because of what George had been saying about Mussolini. George reported this threat. Nothing was done. Years later, private investigator C.C. Tinsley discovered something that should have been immediately disqualifying. The insurance salesman who made that threat, that same man, had served as a member of the coroner's jury that declared the fire accidental. The man who said the house would burn sat on the panel that decided it burned by accident. Tinsley found more. The salesman had previously been employed by George. He had quietly increased the Sodder family's insurance policy, without their knowledge, before the fire. He had financial access to the family, made a specific threat, co-signed the policy, and helped determine the official cause. George's son John told the Roanoke Times in 1984, "The fire marshal was either paid off or they didn't push it." That statement has never been officially refuted. Theory 3. The Mafia, Mussolini, and the children taken alive. George Sodder had enemies. In Fayetteville's tight-knit Italian immigrant community, his loud public criticism of Mussolini had made him unpopular with people whose loyalties still lay with the old country. In the weeks before Christmas, the older Sodder children had noticed a car parked along the road. Their younger siblings walked home from school. Every day. The occupants watched. The family thought little of it. The theory held by the surviving Sodder children, and by older Fayetteville residents who would talk, goes like this. A local organized crime network connected to Italian nationalist groups had attempted to extort George. He refused. The fire was arranged as punishment, not to kill the children, but to take them. Someone the children trusted came through the front door during the chaos, told them they were in danger, led them out before the flames reached their floor, and handed them to waiting men. The theory also holds that the children may have been taken to Italy. Records that could confirm or deny this have never been searched with any official thoroughness. One surviving family member offered this in a later interview. If they did survive all those years and were aware that their parents and siblings had survived too, they may have avoided contact in order to keep them from harm. Think about what that means. 5 children, growing up somewhere else, under different names, knowing their family was alive, and staying away on purpose, to protect them. The Mafia theory cannot be proven, but it is the only theory that explains why the children were not found dead, and also explains why they were never found alive. Theory 4. The hidden evidence and the buried heart. This is the one that stays with me, not because of what happened to the children, but because of what someone did afterward. Private investigator Tinsley spoke with a Fayetteville minister, who relayed a story about Fire Chief F.J. Morris. Morris, who had publicly stated that no remains were found, had privately told someone that he discovered what he described as a human heart in the ashes. He had not told the family. He had buried it on the property, quietly, without explanation. When this reached the Sodders, they confronted Morris directly. He took George to a spot on the property and dug up what he had buried. The family sent it to a pathologist for examination. It was not a heart. It was beef liver, an animal organ, not exposed to fire. Placed in the ground. Sit with that for a moment. Someone had buried a beef liver at the site of the Sodder fire, where the children's remains should have been found, and the fire chief had led the grieving father directly to it. Later, bone fragments sifted from the site were examined by the Smithsonian Institution. The determination: the fragments belonged to someone considerably older than any Sodder child, and showed no signs of exposure to fire. Bones that were not the children's, present in ground that had not burned, placed or left there by someone. This is the theory that sits beneath all the others. Not that the children died or were taken or escaped, but that whatever the truth was, someone, after the fact, worked deliberately to make sure the Sodders could never find it. George and Jenny Sodder did not fold. They built a billboard along Route 16, 14 feet tall, 5 photographs, names, ages, a reward starting at $5,000, eventually reaching $10,000. It stood for nearly 4 decades. People would pull over, walk up to it, stand there, looking into those 5 faces. They wrote to J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. Hoover replied personally. The matter appeared local in character, outside federal jurisdiction. The West Virginia legislature held 2 hearings in 1950. Governor Pattison and State Police Superintendent Burchett then told the Sodders plainly that the case was hopeless. They closed it at the state level. George kept going. A woman in St. Louis said Martha was in a convent. A man in Texas heard something in a bar. Someone in Florida claimed the children were with a relative. George traveled to every lead. He came home every time with nothing. In 1967, he traveled to Texas after a woman wrote that Lewis had revealed his true identity to her one night, and that he and Maurice were living somewhere in the state. George and his son-in-law went. Police helped locate 2 men. Both denied being the missing sons. George's son-in-law said doubts about those denials stayed with George until he died. That same year, Jenny went to collect the mail. An envelope addressed only to her, no return address. Postmarked Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a man in his mid-20s. On the back, in careful handwriting, Lewis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, ill boys, a 90132 or 35. George and Jenny studied that face, the dark curly hair, the dark brown eyes, the straight, strong nose, the left eyebrow, tilted slightly upward, the same way Lewis's had been at 9 years old. Jenny did not put that photograph in a drawer. She hung an enlarged version above the fireplace, where she would see it every single day. The family hired a private investigator and sent him to Kentucky to trace the postmark. They never heard from him again. No report, no explanation, no word. 2 private investigators connected to this case, both vanished. George said in a 1968 interview, "Time is running out for us, but we only want to know. If they did die in the fire, we want to be convinced. Otherwise, we want to know what happened to them." He died 1 year later, 1969, still searching. Jenny lived another 20 years. She wore black every single day after the fire. Not as fashion, not as habit, as a refusal to step into a life where 5 of her children were simply gone and accepted as gone. She tended the garden at the site of the burned house. She maintained the billboard. She sat beneath that photograph every morning. She died February 15th, 1989. She was 85 years old. The billboard came down shortly after. The following are not theories, not feelings. They are documented facts that no official conclusion has ever fully addressed. A telephone line was physically cut at a height the fire did not reach, confirmed by a telephone company lineman. A coal truck serviced and operational that evening did not start. Tampering was found. A ladder kept on the property was moved to a ditch before the fire was reported. A man was on the property that night. he admitted cutting the telephone line. His reason for being there was never established. The fire's official cause, faulty wiring, is contradicted by the fact that the Christmas tree lights remained on during the fire, and the wiring had recently passed inspection. No confirmed human remains of any child were recovered. Household objects survived. The children did not. Bone fragments found at the site belonged to someone considerably older than any Sodder child, and showed no signs of fire exposure. A beef liver, an animal organ not exposed to fire, was buried at the site and presented to the family by the fire chief as possible evidence. The man who threatened the Sodder family sat on the coroner's jury that declared the fire accidental. A photograph of a man bearing strong physical resemblance to Louis Sodder was sent anonymously from Kentucky in 1967 and has never been identified. 2 private investigators connected to this case disappeared without explanation. Any single one of these facts has an innocent explanation. A ladder moved by accident. Wiring that failed without visible signs. A family too devastated to accept loss. But not all 11, not surrounding the same house, the same night, the same 5 children. Jenny Sodder hung that photograph from Kentucky above her fireplace. She looked at it every day for the rest of her life. She never confirmed it was Louis. She never accepted that it wasn't. The billboard is gone. The reward was never claimed. The Kentucky investigator never came back. The fire chief died. The insurance salesman died. The coroner's jury disbanded. The FBI file has never been fully released. The youngest surviving Sodder child, Sylvia, who was 2 years old on the night of the fire, said until her death in 2021 that she did not believe her brothers and sisters had burned. She was the last one who was there. Maurice was 14. Martha was 12. Louis was 9. Jenny was 8. Betty was 5. They have not been found. They have not been proven dead. And the question Jenny had inscribed on that billboard, the one that faced every driver on Route 16 for nearly 40 years, was not, "What happened?" It was this: "What did they have to gain by making us suffer all these years? Why did they lie and force us to accept those lies?"